Mr. Stroller?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll bring the ladies and gentlemen of the jury back out, please.
Jury's entering the courtroom.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can be seated, and we're ready to resume. Ms. Corey, your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Andrew Williams.
Andrew Williams, please. Good afternoon, Mr. Williams. If you'll come all the way to the front here for me, please, sir. And if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath to you.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
All right, sir, if you'll come right around here and have a seat for me. And be sure to kind of speak directly into that microphone, nice and loudly, so everybody can hear you, all right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Ms. Corey, go right ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. State your name for the record.
Andrew Williams,
In which city and county do you reside?
Jacksonville, Duval County.
In November of 2012, where did you reside?
Jacksonville and Duval County.
What was your occupation at that time?
I was a cabinet installer.
I'm sorry, repeat
A
that.
cabinet installer?
Yes, sir. Were you married at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your wife's name?
Melissa Williams,
And in what specific area, not an address, but in what specific area of town did you live?
Bay Meadows.
And with whom were you living
My
at
wife.
that time? And anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Let me take your attention to Thanksgiving weekend of 2012. Were you in town for that Thanksgiving weekend?
Yes, ma'am.
And on the Friday after Thanksgiving, were you off that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall in the evening hours starting around, let's start around 7 o'clock, what were your plans for that evening?
To take two teenagers that went to our church to their first date, to a movie and dinner.
All right, were you and your wife the chaperones for those teenagers?
Yes, ma'am.
And where did you intend to go to dinner?
I want to say I think we were going to go to the Avenues Mall, I believe, to eat dinner.
And which way would you normally drive from your home to the Avenues Mall?
Bay Meadows to Southside Boulevard, down Southside Boulevard.
And were you and Mrs. Williams in the car at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have the three teenagers with you?
Two. Yes,
Two,
ma'am.
I'm sorry. Where were they sitting?
Backseat.
And was it your intention to head directly to dinner?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you going to make any stops at that time?
No, ma'am.
And then where would the movies have been after that point?
Tinseltown.
Okay. So would you have been coming back up Southside Boulevard heading north?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to the time when you got to the intersection of Bay Meadows Road at Southside Boulevard, have you been through that intersection before?
Several times.
Are you very familiar with that intersection?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the Gate gas station, which sits on the northeast corner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you pulled into the Gate gas station before?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. At approximately 7:30 or several minutes thereafter, were you near that intersection?
Yes, ma'am.
And in which direction were you traveling on Bay Meadows Road from your
I
home?
think it's west.
Okay.
think, yeah.
And so when you got to the Gate gas station, did you hear or see anything unusual right at that time?
Yes.
All right. No, I'm talking about when you first pulled up.
Oh, no.
All right. Which lane were you in to turn to go to the restaurant?
The second or the first hand left turn lane.
Okay. You would have been heading south then on Southside Boulevard?
Yes, ma'am.
And describe your vehicle.
Blue Honda CRV.
Where were you sitting?
Driver's seat.
Where was your wife sitting?
Passenger seat.
Where were the teenagers?
In the back seat.
Were your windows up or down?
Up.
Describe the weather conditions.
Dark, and I believe it was a bit chilly.
Okay. Was it raining at all?
Not that I remember.
Was there any thunder or any other weather noise to obstruct your hearing?
Not that I remember, no, ma'am.
Okay. Describe the flow of traffic at that intersection. Have you been through that intersection at various times?
Yes, ma'am.
And does the traffic flow vary with different times of the day?
Yes, ma'am.
On this particular holiday, or this particular afternoon on a Friday evening, what was it like?
Dead. Nothing going on.
Okay. Outside of normal traffic noise, was there any other loud noise, such as a car alarm, a store alarm, or anything else while you were at that intersection?
No, ma'am.
Were you the first car waiting to turn left on that inside lane?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the noise level inside of your own car?
Talking, just conversation between me and the teenagers.
What did you hear while you were at that red light?
Noises sounded like, one of the teenagers actually said, "Is that fireworks?" And I was like, "No, that's gunfire."
You called it gunfire.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you recognize it as such when you heard it?
Yes, ma'am.
How many shots did you hear fired?
Several, more than 5, less than 10.
Okay. And what did you do when you heard those shots?
Turned around.
And how did you make that turn?
I made a left-hand turn like as if I was going to be going towards the Avenues Mall and made a U-turn to go back up Southside Boulevard.
On your monitor, the state will show you State's Exhibit 3 in evidence. And I want to ask you, sir, is that a picture that you can use to show the jurors where you were?
Yeah.
All right, if you touch that screen, a mark should come up. And can you just show them approximately where you were at the intersection?
Right there.
Okay. And go ahead and draw the U-turn that you did. And then what did you do after that to get into the Gate gas station?
Draw it.
You can draw it, yes. How did you know the shots had come from that direction?
Just heard it. It sounded like it'd come from that direction.
Okay. Why did you go back to the Gate gas station?
I don't know. Something inside me told me to go.
All right. Were you going to try to help if you were needed?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you pull in at the Gate gas station?
I pulled into the first gas pump to the left in the gas station.
All right. Can you just show the jurors, just touch that photo as to where you first pulled in? Was it dark outside? Was it
Yeah.
nighttime?
Yes.
Were the Gate gas station lights on?
Yes, ma'am.
Was it fairly well lit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you pulled in, where did you specifically park your car?
Right there where that dot is, there's a pump right under it. I don't remember what pump it was or anything.
Sir, did you see anything obvious that could be connected to the shooting when you stopped your car?
When I was pulling in, a car was pulling out pretty quickly.
All right. Describe that car.
It was a small car. I don't know exactly the make or model or color. I wasn't really paying attention to it. Just kind of pulled out very quickly and I pulled in.
All right. Did you ever see that car again that evening?
No, ma'am.
All right. Then after that, what took your attention to anything else going on at the Gate gas station?
There was a red vehicle, a SUV, backing up from the vicinity of the other shops, pulled into a spot in front of the gas station, and there was a young man that got out and was very upset.
All right. First, let me ask you to show the jurors what you mean by the vicinity of the other shops. Point to that and then draw an arrow. Okay. And in which direction did the car, you say it was in reverse, backing up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and where did it back to?
There's a parking spot right there.
All right. And were you out of your vehicle at this time?
No, I was in my vehicle. I just put it into park, and I saw it backing up.
All right. What did you see next?
I pulled in forwards into the parking spot. Young man got out, very
Do you
upset.
recall which side of the car the young man got out?
I believe it was the driver.
Did you see any type of weapon in that young man's hand at all?
No,
Did you see any weapons coming out of that vehicle being thrown anywhere?
no.
Did you have a clear view of the driver when he got out of the red vehicle?
His side, no. I mean, I saw the door open and I saw his head, but I was on the opposite side of the vehicle.
Did you see him make any throwing throwing gestures towards the bushes near his vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Did you hear or see the other occupants of the vehicle at that particular time?
I heard them.
What did you hear?
Upsetness. One of the young men was yelling, "He's not moving."
I'm sorry, you're going to need to speak up. I don't know if it's the microphone. I'm having a hard time. Just go ahead. What did you hear him say next? Or what did you hear the young man say?
One of the young men was saying, "He's not moving."
He's not moving.
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
you know at that point in time to whom they were referring?
No.
What did you do then?
Walked up to the car to see what was going on.
All right. Did you have any concerns at all that someone inside that car was going to hurt you?
No.
What happened?
I pulled up to the car. There was a young man that had been hit. I checked for a pulse. There was another young man that was crying, saying he wasn't moving. And
Can you describe in a little more detail how the young man who you said wasn't moving, where was he in relation to the other young man, and in which seat in the car were they?
I believe it was the passenger side, or the driver's side rear. And the young man was holding him and just saying he's not moving.
Rear seat.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the driver's side, did
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know the young man that was sitting there?
No, ma'am.
And where was the other young man in relation to that young man?
The passenger side.
Okay, was he sitting upright?
Yes, ma'am.
The person on the passenger side?
They were kind of together. I don't know if he was straight up.
Humped together?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do at that point?
I checked for a pulse. I didn't feel one. I looked over my shoulder and there was an officer that had pulled up.
Okay. Were you coming in through the driver's side of the vehicle to try to give aid?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your training that made you believe you could give at least some aid, initial aid?
I was a junior lifeguard growing up and just done different things. I was actually at the time looking into doing EMT, and so
Short of basic CPR, did you know any other life-saving techniques?
other than, put pressure on it, no, ma'am.
Okay. Now, did you help try to render any further aid to the young man that was not moving?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you do that?
I went up to the officer that had pulled on the scene. I asked for gloves so I could assess the situation. Walked over, again, felt for a pulse, didn't feel one. Asked the officer to come over and help me pull him out to where he could get him on the ground to start CPR or to start trying to put pressure on the wounds until the paramedics got there.
All right. Well, the paramedics were not there yet, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
And did that officer assist you?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you attempt some sort of life-saving efforts while that young man was on the ground?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you know that young man?
No, ma'am.
Did you know any of the young man in that red vehicle? Any
No,
of the
ma'am.
young men in that red vehicle?
No, ma'am.
All right. Did you know the officer who pulled up?
No, ma'am.
And at what point did Jack's Fire and Rescue arrive?
After we pulled him out, probably about maybe 5 minutes.
Is that your estimate of the
Yes,
time?
ma'am. I'm not positive the exact time.
All right. Did you ever see any signs of life in the young man that you had pulled out of that red car?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever hear him utter anything?
No, ma'am.
Could you tell whether or not he was even breathing when you and the officer pulled him out of the car?
He had no pulse and he was not. It did not look like he was breathing.
Okay. And the other young man who was in the back seat with him, did you know his name?
No, ma'am.
And what did he do when you all pulled the gentleman out of the car? What did that other young man do?
He just kind of stood to the side and watched.
What was his demeanor at that time?
Very shook up.
I'm sorry?
Very shook up.
Did you see any tears on any of those young men?
Yes, ma'am.
Ever hear them express any anger towards anyone, much less the person who had shot their friend?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever hear them use any curse words towards anyone?
Not that I recall.
Did you hear any curse words towards the shooter?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever even know who the shooter was at that time?
No, ma'am.
We're going to show you one last picture, which is in evidence as State's Exhibit 8, and I would just like for you to show the jurors, ignore the tag inset, that's a composite exhibit for later, but does this picture sort of depict where the car was when you walked up to it?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall if the driver's doors were open or closed?
As I said, I think when the driver door opened when he got out.
All right, and can you show the jurors the area where you and the officer laid this young man on the ground? All right. Did you leave anything of your own there at the scene?
No, ma'am.
Once rescue arrived, did you back away and let them and law enforcement take over the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you stay at the gas station to tell police just what you knew of what
Yes, ma'am.
happened? Now, sir,
You were a junior lifeguard at 16 years old, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How
Sure.
old are you today?
I'm 22.
And how old were you in 2012 when this happened?
21.
Okay. So from 16 to 21, any other CPR, life-saving, any type of medical training at all other than at 16 to be a junior
ma'am.
lifeguard?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you're giving CPR to Mr. Jordan Davis, are you focused on what you're doing?
Very much so.
You would agree that this was a very traumatic event for you because this is the first time you ever gave CPR, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But you're telling this jury that as you're giving Jordan Davis CPR, you're watching what other people are doing around you?
I can pay attention, yeah.
Okay. And again, you have no medical training, correct?
No, sir.
No law enforcement training?
No, sir.
No first responder training?
No, sir.
The only thing you've testified today is you were thinking about a career at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you pursued that career? Are you an EMT right now?
Nope.
Have you taken any type of medical training or law enforcement as of today?
No.
Okay. Isn't it true you used to own a firearm?
Yes.
And you got rid of that firearm?
Objection, outside the scope.
Sustained.
Mr. Williams, it took you about a minute and a half to 2 minutes before that light turned green, made a U-turn, went all the way down the street, another U-turn and pulled in, correct?
How long did you say?
About a minute and a half, 2 minutes, is that fair?
Probably.
Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you think that's a fair representation of your time?
I didn't have a stop clock on me. I don't know. It just, I mean, it's probably about a minute to turn around and everything. The light was green.
Okay. And at that point, you waited a minute for it to turn green, correct?
No, it had turned green when we heard the gunshots, and that's when I made the U-turn.
All right, and then you went all the way down, made another U-turn and came in.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You testified that you saw a car leaving the parking lot, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you have no idea whose car that is, correct?
No, sir.
Is it a possibility that could have been somebody else also leaving the gas station after shots were fired?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not here to testify that that was Mr. Dunn's vehicle, correct?
I don't know whose vehicle it was.
All right, so the relevance is almost nothing because you're not sure who it is, correct?
I don't know whose vehicle it was, yeah.
Now, you're on scene for about another minute before that SUV backs up, correct?
No, it was backing up as I was pulling into my parking spot.
Okay, and can you tell me what the people did in the SUV when it was in the other parking lot?
Nothing. They
You
were
didn't see
backing
it?
up.
Right, well, you didn't even see it stop, correct?
It was in backing up motion.
Right, so when you saw it, it was already backing up, correct?
Correct.
And how close to the gate parking lot was it when you saw it?
I mean, probably 40 to 60 feet.
Okay, and that's from the parking lot, correct? You have to say it out loud.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, the picture you just saw with the state's evidence, you're talking about 40 to 60 feet from where that red Durango parked, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, how many first responders, meaning law enforcement officers, were on scene when you got there?
When I got there, I believe one police officer was pulling in.
Okay, so you pull in the same time as law enforcement, correct?
No, I'm sorry. When I was sitting there and saw the car pull in, an officer had pulled up.
And, because we keep saying the word car a lot, are you talking about when the red Durango pulls in, there's no law enforcement on scene, correct?
Correct. It pulled in. I looked around. Law enforcement officer was pulling on scene.
Okay, and you saw, I believe you said you saw the back window shot out, is that correct?
I believe the back was shot, yeah,
Okay, and that's just based on your recollection today?
if I remember, yeah.
Okay, and would you agree, was this a very traumatic experience for you? Have you ever been involved in anything like this before?
Not to this grade, no.
Okay, and you have no training to deal with anything like this, is that correct?
No.
Now, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, did I hear you asked law enforcement first responders for a pair of gloves?
I asked the officer for gloves, yes.
Okay, and, well, would you agree that officers are first responders and trained in first response techniques?
I would guess that they have CPR training, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that. I mean, I would assume it.
Okay. And by the time you asked for those gloves, how many officers were on scene?
One.
Just the one? Okay. And is that, let me ask you this, when you checked for his pulse, do you have any type of medical training to check for a pulse?
From CPR?
And that's when you were 16? Mm-hmm. Okay. And at that point, you then asked the officer to help you get Mr. Davis out of the vehicle?
Yes.
Still only one officer on scene?
At that time, other officers had come on scene.
All right. And
I don't
you asked-
remember how many.
Okay. And at that point, you asked them, is that correct?
There was one officer on scene when I asked for gloves.
Yes.
When I got gloves, I went over, checked for a pulse again. I went back to an officer and said, hey, there's no pulse. He's not moving. We probably need to go ahead and pull him out and try to see if he's okay.
Now, did you tell these officers the only medical training I have is when I was 16 as a junior lifeguard?
No,
Did they ask you?
no.
They just handed you a pair of gloves and said, okay, go ahead and do it.
I said I'd like to check on the young man in there, and they said okay.
All right. And then when you asked them to help you pull them out, at that point, did they ask you for any type of medical training that you had?
No.
They just agreed, okay, we'll help you pull them out.
Yes.
Now, since this has happened, have you seen anything about this on TV?
Not really. I do my best to kind of not do much attention to it.
Okay. Even when it first happened?
I remember my wife telling me that something had come on.
And do you recall going on Facebook to seek out the Davis family?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And matter of fact, when you went to the memorial, you sought out Tevin Thompson and Leland Brunson, correct?
Yes.
And I believe, if I recall, you said Tommy Storms was not there?
I don't remember if he was or not. I don't remember. I didn't personally see him. Like, I didn't personally talk to him or interact with him that I recall.
Would you have recognized him if you did see him?
Oh, I would have recognized him if I don't know if he could have been somewhere else, but
Okay. And again, when you're asking for gloves, checking a pulse, pulling Mr. Davis out of the car, and administering CPR, are you telling this jury that you were still cognizant of where everybody was outside of that gate gas station?
I had a pretty decent idea. I was kind of looking around because I was hoping that rescue would show up soon.
All right. And you said rescue took about 5 minutes?
Right about that, yeah.
All right. Nothing further, Judge.
Very
Ms. Corey?
briefly,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Williams, is it particularly complicated to feel for someone's pulse?
No, ma'am.
And did you do that through the young man's wrist,
No, ma'am. I did it through his neck.
through his neck? Did you
Yes,
ever
ma'am.
feel for a pulse on his, did you ever find any evidence of a pulse on his neck?
No.
And were you there just to help?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
May he be excused?
He may.
Mr. Stroll?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you being here. State's next witness.
Yes, sir. Sean Atkins?
Sean Atkins, please. Mr. Atkins, if you'll come right here before the clerk and do as best you can, raise your right hand for her to administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Atkins, if you come right around this way, the bailiff will help you into the witness chair. Whoops. And if you can, just scoot up as close as you can to that microphone. Just speak loudly into the microphone so everybody can hear you, all right?
All right.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Corey, you're right.
Yes, Your Honor. State and spell your name for the record.
Sean Lee Atkins, SHAWNLEEATKINS.
Are you currently incarcerated in the Florida State Prison?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell these jurors the circumstances of your incarceration.
On March and April of 2013, not only did I steal gold from a family member of mine and sold it, I also broke into a house of a lady friend of my grandmother's, sold gold from there too.
Tell them why you did that.
I was homeless. I had trying to get to Illinois to a place where I could live, have a house, and get a job.
Did you admit to those crimes?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And did you get convicted as a felon of those crimes?
Unfortunately, yes.
By whose office were you prosecuted?
Clay County in your office.
How many felonies did you plead to?
25.
Were they all connected to those same instances that you just described to the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Were they different counts but all involving the same instances?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And were you sentenced by a Clay County judge?
Yes, ma'am.
To what term of prison?
7 years.
All right. All of this occurred after November of 2012. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Prior to your incarceration, or I guess we'll go with the arrest. When were you first arrested for the crimes that led to your incarceration?
May 4th, 2013.
Okay. Prior to that time, where were you living?
At my grandmother's house.
Where is
and
that
then
located? Not a specific address, just a county.
Orange Park, Clay County.
Okay. And did you ever live part of the time in Duval County?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me take your attention back to November of 2012. Did you have an occupation at that time?
No, ma'am.
Were you earning any money whatsoever at that time?
No, ma'am.
Did you have a girlfriend at that time?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Was she a serious girlfriend?
Yes.
Did she have any employment towards the end of November of 2012?
Yes, she just got a job a couple days prior.
Did she have a place to live?
No, ma'am.
On that Thanksgiving weekend of November 2012, where were you and your girlfriend living?
In my 88 Dodge Dakota out on the streets of not Orange Park, Jacksonville.
You were literally living in your car,
Yes, ma'am.
and she was living in your car with you?
Yes, ma'am.
How would you bathe?
I had friends that would help us out with bathing if it really came down to it. I went to a bathroom at a gas station or a store and washed in a sink.
All right. What was your girlfriend's name?
Lauren Alderman,
Have you seen her since your incarceration?
one time in June, but not since.
Okay. Let me take your attention to the Friday evening after Thanksgiving, which was November 23rd of 2012, around 7 o'clock that evening. Do you recall that evening?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall events that occurred at a gas station near where you were living out of your car?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Let's go back to the 7 o'clock hour. Where were you and your girlfriend specifically parked in your vehicle?
Before we went to the gate, we were parked at the Winn-Dixie on the right-hand side of it, and she had to use the restroom, so we went to the gate, and then we parked in the farthest left spot.
Okay. Hold on just a little bit, because I do
Yes,
want
ma'am.
to clarify a couple of things for the jury. What would you, 7 till about 7:30, what were you and Miss Alderman doing?
Listening to music on the radio, talking, reading books. That's about it.
Okay. We're going to show you a photograph marked into evidence as State's Exhibit 3. And while this does not depict the Winn-Dixie, can you show them the general area of where you were that evening?
Touch a screen.
Yes, please touch the screen.
That way, a little.
That way, a little more.
Yeah, just a little bit more.
What were the traffic conditions that evening at Southside and Bay Meadows? Was it heavy traffic?
It was Jacksonville traffic. Not very heavy, not too heavy, that light.
All right. And describe again the vehicle that you two were in.
A brown 88 Dodge Dakota with a one bench seat.
All right. And had you been familiar with that intersection prior to that night of kind of living at the Winn-Dixie?
Yes, ma'am. One time I lived close by there.
All right. Why did you leave the Winn-Dixie to go to the gas station?
Lauren had to use the restroom.
What time approximately, if you can recall, did you pull out of the Winn-Dixie?
About 7:20, if that, maybe a little bit earlier.
And can you show the jurors on that photograph by drawing the route you took to go into the gas station? When you entered, were there sufficient parking spaces available for you and Miss Alderman to pull into?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at what end of the station did you pull in?
The left side.
From the driveway? When you turned, which way
Oh, I
did
took
you-
a right after getting in the driveway.
Okay, and then you pulled in immediately to your left?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me show you State's Exhibit 8 and ask you, sir, in relation to this photograph, this obviously was not what appeared when you pulled in, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But just show the jurors approximately where you pulled in and parked. All right. At that time, when you pulled in and parked, was there anyone other than you and Miss Alderman in your car?
No, just me and Lauren.
And at the minute you pulled in, did you pull in frontwards?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, just normal? And was there anyone to your right in the parking space immediately to your right?
Not when anyone immediately to my right. No.
Okay. How about 2 parking spaces over?
No.
And then 3 parking spaces over from where you were?
Yes, ma'am.
What color car?
Red Durango.
All right. Did you notice that car when you pulled in?
Not immediately when I pulled in. No.
All right. Were your windows up or down?
Down.
And did Miss Alderman open her passenger door to get out?
Yes, ma'am.
When she opened her passenger door or through your windows, which were down, did you hear any unnecessarily loud music?
No, ma'am.
Would you have noticed loud music?
Honestly, no. I've lived in the city so long, I just ignore it and drown it out.
All right. Did Miss Alderman close the door after she got out?
Yes, ma'am.
Why didn't you go inside?
I was watching my truck, make sure no one stole any of our stuff out of it.
Your personal items were actually in your truck where you were living?
They were in the bed of my truck in a little, like, Starlight tote case.
All right. What were the weather conditions that you recall that evening?
Clear, a little humid.
How long do you think Miss Alderman was inside the gate gas station?
5 minutes, a little bit more.
Could you see into the red Dodge Durango?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And could you hear anyone saying anything from the red Dodge Durango?
No, ma'am.
What were you doing yourself while you were waiting for Miss Alderman?
Just observing, I guess, is the easiest way to put it.
And while you were there waiting for Miss Alderman to come out of the gate gas station, did you observe and hear something very unusual?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell these jurors what happened.
I heard 2 gunshots. Sounded like firecrackers going off to my right.
And is that what drew your attention to your right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if I am in your driver's spot right here, then you're saying you heard sounds to your right,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? And then approximately how far from where I am to where our bailiff is, where our police officer is, would you say you saw the red Dodge Durango? Tell us where in the courtroom that would have been if I'm you in your vehicle.
Probably 5, 6 feet before her.
Okay, could you walk this way towards me? I would like for you to tell our officer when to stop when you think that's where.
Right about there.
Right about there. And did you notice any vehicle on the other side of the red Dodge Durango?
Not till it backed out.
Okay, so at this point, thank you so much, Karina. At this point, then, what did you see right there from here to there? Was there anything obstructing your view?
Just the Durango.
Okay, and how many shots did you hear
I heard 2 before it backed out and sped off.
before what backed out and sped?
The Durango.
Okay, when you say backed out and sped off, can you exactly describe the motion of the car? In other words, did it back straight out or did it do a turn and then head out?
I believe it backed straight out. A little bit foggy on that one, but it backed straight out and drove off right behind me.
Okay, and when you say it drove off, did you notice which direction that vehicle traveled?
My left.
Okay.
Toward
Are you
north.
familiar? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I talked over you. Start over. Did you notice in which direction that vehicle traveled?
Northbound. They were trying to go to, it looked like they were going south side Boulevard.
But could you see it after that point?
No, ma'am. As soon as they left the parking lot, I lost view of it.
What drew your attention back over into the area where the Durango had just been? Were there more shots fired?
Yes, ma'am.
How many more?
About 4 to 5 more, maybe more than that.
And was the red Durango still there when that second set of shots was fired?
No, ma'am.
Was it driving?
Yeah, they were driving off.
Okay. Now, did you see who was shooting?
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to describe to this jury who was doing the shooting.
An older gentleman with white hair. And honestly, if I saw him on the streets, he looked like a businessman kind of thing. He was dressed nice, had a nice car and everything.
Okay. Did you see how he fired the gun?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Judge, may he stand up and demonstrate for the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, sir, I realize you have shackles on. Are you able to do it from there? Okay, stay by that's all right, stay. They can't see you. I need you to come towards our bailiff. All right, and just show the jurors the stance you saw that person take.
Crouch down like that, shooting the gun.
How did you describe that stance?
A police stance.
Okay, you better get back on the microphone. Why did you describe that as a police stance?
It's like trying to either hide behind a door or get better aim.
All right, and after you saw the shooter in that position, what did you see him do?
He closed the door of his car, and his lady friend came out of the gate.
All right, hold on. How did you know it was his lady friend?
At first, I didn't know until she hopped in the car.
All right, you saw a lady hop in his car.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see where that lady had come from?
She came from the cash register.
Okay, and you were still watching all of this from your car.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that sidewalk that runs from the in front of your car, where the circle is on the photo, all the way to the front door of the gate. Is that fairly well lit?
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, can you see the outdoor lighting in this photo?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
And is that what allowed you to see from your car to that
Yes,
dark
ma'am.
vehicle? Were you sure that the person that was the driver of that car that the young lady got in, was that the same person who fired shots at the Durango?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And sir, did you hear the lady say anything to the driver?
I ain't hear her say anything, but the look on her face said enough.
All right. What did the look on her face say to you? Describe it.
Horror.
Horror?
Horror.
Okay. And did you hear the driver that you had seen shooting, could you hear him say anything to her?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now, did you then, what happened then? I'm sorry, strike that. Did you ever get out of your car at that point?
No, ma'am.
Did you get out of your car immediately after you saw the young lady get into the dark car?
Not until they drove off.
All right. Did you watch them drive off?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do?
I turned around and got the license plate number.
What made you turn around and get that license plate number?
I don't know. I guess instinct. Something told me that's what I should do.
All right. And did you memorize that license plate number?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. How did the shooter drive off?
Fast. They drove off the same direction as the Durango. With a little bit of speed.
Okay. Did you stay in your car after you had memorized his license tag number?
For a second, just to make sure he drove off a little bit, and then I went up into the gate gas station.
All right. What did you do when you got inside the gate gas station?
I gave the first cashier I seen the license plate number.
Did she write it down or did you write it down?
I wrote it down for her.
I'm going to show you what's been marked into evidence in State Exhibit 170. 170. And I'm going to ask you, sir, is this the brown bag that you were given to write the license plate number on?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the license plate you actually wrote yourself on there?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you read that license plate to the jury?
Yes, ma'am. It's Florida 937 VMV.
What did you do with this brown paper bag after you wrote that in your own handwriting?
Handed it to the cashier.
All right. And Judge, may I publish to the jury?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you like me to show it or pass it?
Either, whatever you prefer.
And could you remind them they'll get all of these exhibits later?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the exhibits that you're seeing, the photographs and this exhibit here, and there'll be others, you will get copies of and be allowed to take back into the jury room with you to review during your deliberations.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, where was Miss Alderman at the time you were doing this and giving this piece of paper to the clerk?
Well, when I went in there, I thought she was in the bathroom. I guess while I was writing down the license plate number, she crept on past me, sort of. I didn't see her go by.
I'm sorry, I missed the last thing you said. We just took the photo down. Go ahead, repeat the last thing you said.
I said that when I was giving the license plate number to the lady, she must have walked on past me from the bathroom, because I went in there to go see if she was there to get her to go, and she was already in the truck.
She was in the truck.
Yes, ma'am.
To your knowledge, at that time, had she seen or heard anything?
She didn't see nothing.
Did you leave the gate and go get back into your truck?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Atkins, did you leave that gas station at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
Why did you do that?
2 reasons. 1, I was terrified. 2, I had absconded from my probation, my misdemeanor probation. I didn't really want to deal with the police.
All right. Tell the jurors what happened that made you return to that gate gas station.
She slapped me. It made me go back.
Who slapped you?
Lauren did.
Had you told her what you had seen,
Yes, ma'am. When we got on the south side,
and she made you go back up there?
she forced me to go back.
Did you want to go back up there, Mr. Atkins?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you know that by going back up there, there would be police officers there?
I was sure of it.
All right. And then, did you pull back into the parking lot?
Not immediately.
Tell the jurors why you couldn't pull back in at that time.
Police had it taped off so I couldn't go by. There was, according to the officer, a murder investigation. Or, well, at that time it was a shooting. That's what they
Shooting
called it.
investigation. All right, how long do you think you were gone from the time you got back into the car and pulled out with Miss Alderman to the time you returned to the Gate gas station?
5 minutes, give or take.
And in that time, sir, did you tell anyone else besides Miss Alderman about what happened?
No.
Did you see any other police officers at the destination where you drove? Did you go back to the Winn-Dixie?
No, I didn't make it there.
Okay, you turned around and went back.
I turned right on the south, or left on the south side, and made a U-turn on Bay Meadows into the gate.
Okay, and did you then tell the police what you had witnessed?
No, I told them that I saw everything go down, but I didn't tell them the details of what I saw.
Right, but did they ask you to remain at the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you remain at the scene,
Yes, ma'am, I did.
knowing that they could determine that you were on probation at the time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did Miss Alderman wait there with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you eventually go down to the Police Memorial Building in downtown Jacksonville?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you speak to the police and convey to them what you've conveyed here to this jury?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you ever shown that brown piece of paper again?
No, that's the first time I've seen it since that night.
And sir, did there come a time at your deposition when you talked to Mr. Guy about hopefully helping you out of this trouble you were in?
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you do that?
Got 7 years. That's a long time, and I'm young. It's
Okay.
you're only young once.
To your knowledge, while your charges were pending in Clay County, even though it's our office, do you know whether anyone, or did you or your lawyer ever directly contact us about your situation?
Overruled.
No, ma'am. We never.
Was there ever a part of your plea bargain on the record in Clay County that mentioned that you were a witness in this case?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever try to make contact with me or Miss Wolfson or Mr. Guy prior to the time you were brought back for a deposition?
No, ma'am.
And as you testify here today in front of the jury, are you expecting any special benefit from your testimony?
No, ma'am.
Tell these jurors why you went back to the Gate gas station.
Sustained.
Tell them why you're testifying here in court today.
To do the right thing.
May I have just a moment with co-counsel?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Guy? That's all I have for Mr. Atkins.
Mr. Stroller, cross?
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Atkins, just to stay on topic from that, at the time you got sentenced, did you know what your sentence would be?
Yes.
Okay. And when I took your deposition, Mr. Guy was there, I was there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And prior to you entering even in the room is when you approached Mr. Guy privately and asked for those benefits and favors, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you asked him for two based on your testimony in this case, isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
One was you wanted to stay in Jacksonville as long as possible, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't want to go back to prison, did you?
No, sir.
The other one is you asked if you could get some of your sentencing reduction for you being a witness in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Isn't it true that after your depo was over that day, you got to stay in Jacksonville for over a month before you were sent back to DOC?
I stayed for a month and a day, and then I was sent back to the OC.
Okay, so the answer to my question was yes. you
Yes, sir.
stayed for over a month, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you did receive a benefit that you asked for, is that fair?
I guess you can say that.
It just wasn't long enough for your liking?
It was fine enough for me, sir.
Now, you indicate that you heard two shots and then the red SUV backed out, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said you believed it backed out straight, but you're foggy on that. That was your testimony, correct?
Yes, sir.
You also admit that you were homeless at the time when these crimes occurred that you're now in custody for, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me ask you this. On the evening that this happened, did you have any type of drugs or alcohol or synthetic marijuana in your system that night?
No, sir.
And you're saying you couldn't hear music or you just ignored it?
I couldn't hear it. It's a possibility that I just ignored it because, like I said, I lived in the city a few years. Just, you start to drown out those things.
Okay. But if something was playing music loud enough to make mirrors or vibrate and shake, have you been around cars that are on the street that do that?
Yeah, that was not happening.
Okay. And there's a difference. Would you agree there's a difference between loud music and then maybe
Ridiculous.
something- I'm sorry?
Ridiculous music.
Ridiculously loud?
Yeah, that was not happening.
Okay. And you've even been around it where it's so loud it may even hurt your ears. Think that's fair?
Yes, sir.
And if it was that loud that night, you'd be able to hear that ridiculously loud music?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, prior to any gunshots, were you looking over at the red SUV?
For a second, when the driver came out of the gate and hopped into the red SUV,
Okay, and you're talking about the gentleman with the dreadlocks, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And how long was he in that red SUV before that first shot was fired?
Less than a minute, probably.
And again, you can't testify to what words were exchanged, right?
No, sir.
You can't testify to what actions happened on the other side of that Durango, correct?
No, sir.
And matter of fact, isn't it true you told the police that night that it actually looked like Mr. Dunn, who you now know as Mr. Dunn, was shooting in the ground as the SUV was leaving? Is that true?
I thought it was, but I really have no experience with a firearm.
Okay. And based on that lack of experience, I'm assuming, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, correct me if I'm wrong, that would have freaked you out being in that situation.
Oh, I was terrified.
And you were so terrified, you didn't even realize that your longtime serious girlfriend walked right by you inside the gas station, correct?
Not at all. Never saw her.
And afterwards, talking to her, when you came back, you realized she's in the car. She must have walked right by you.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like you walked around the store, went into the bathroom, anything like that.
Well, when I got in there and I gave the lady at the desk the license plate number, I went into the, not gonna lie, I knocked it on the girl's bathroom. I was terrified. I don't want to get Lauren out of there, and she wasn't in there.
Okay. So at that point, though, it's safe to assume you're at the front desk, right by the front door, and Lauren walked right by you.
Yeah, she went right by.
Now, were you there when the SUV pulled back?
I was still inside the store when it pulled back.
Okay. So as you're leaving, the SUV was already back, correct?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that that SUV was in a different spot entirely from where it was when the shooting took place?
I can't recollect.
Okay. Is it possible that SUV was closer to your car when it came back than at the time of the shooting?
It's possible.
Okay. But you don't have a clear recollection. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Now, that night you were taken to the homicide office, true?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, you actually saw 3 of the guys from that SUV, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
You were there when they actually took those 3 gentlemen and put them in different rooms, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was the same room eventually they put you into, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that purpose of you going into that room is so that Ms. Wolfson could take your sworn statement. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
She administered you an oath just like the clerk did today, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were told that this was going to be videotaped and they were going to take your statement, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was after the other 3 gentlemen from the SUV had already given their statements and left. Is that correct?
I believe so. No, because when we got back to the desk and sat down, they left. They sat in another room until probably about 30 minutes before me and Lauren left.
Okay. So even when you were in the room and videotaped and recorded and sworn, when you came out, those guys were still there for a little bit?
Yes, sir.
And Miss Wolfson was present?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize her today as the lady asking you questions that day on video?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was she also there talking to the other 3 gentlemen that were in the SUV?
I believe so.
Okay. And the homicide detectives were obviously there because you're at the homicide office, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall how long you were there?
From about 9 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning.
So you were there for about 6 hours.
Yeah, for a good minute.
Well, that's being a little facetious, correct?
Just a tiny bit.
Okay. Now, you indicated in that videotape statement that Mr. Dunn was actually leaning out of the car, correct?
He was crouched, but
Do you recall if you would have said leaning that night that they took your video?
I may have. I don't remember.
Okay. But sitting here today, it's a possibility you just don't recall.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know how long that red SUV was gone once it left after those couple of shots were fired?
2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, not very long at all.
Okay. And isn't it true the homicide detectives never asked you about that red SUV leaving the scene?
Oh, I don't remember that, sir.
Is it possible that they only asked you about Mr. Dunn shooting and never asked you about the red SUV leaving? Is that possible?
It's possible.
And that's just because you can't recall today.
Yes, sir.
Same thing with Miss Wolfson. Is it possible that she never even asked you about that red SUV leaving or any type of time frames?
It's possible.
Have they showed you that video to refresh your recollection prior to today?
No, sir.
Have they showed you any reports or any statements you gave to the police before coming here today?
When me and you did our deposition, I saw my statement I filled out, but I didn't see no police report.
Right, and they didn't show you the video.
No, sir.
And even as of today, when they brought you over from your correctional facility to testify, they've still never refreshed your recollection with either the video of your reports, correct?
Correct.
Judge, if I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Atkins, you said when you returned to the parking lot, they wouldn't let you in. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're talking about the gate parking lot. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
So are you familiar with that area? I know you were staying across the street over by the Winn-Dixie, but are you familiar with that plaza? I think Ms. Corey put a picture up that you were drawing on.
I'm very familiar with that area.
Okay. That plaza and parking lot was actually open where people could drive into that plaza, correct?
No, not from where I was going. The police stopped me as soon as I got to the turn off the driveway.
Right, as you came up the driveway, you just couldn't pull into the gate parking lot.
No, I couldn't even pull into the parking lot.
All right, how did you get into the parking lot? You said you drove around and pulled in?
I drove to the UE on South Side, came to the first right driveway, and the officer, he waved me down. He said, "You can't go." And I told him that I saw what happened. And then he asked me to pull up a little bit further onto the grass and sit there for a few minutes.
And that was right outside the gate gas station, correct?
Yes, sir.
So there's actually extra entrances into that plaza north, further north, correct?
Yes, sir.
You never even had to go down there, did you?
No.
So again, you have no idea if those were open and letting people into the plaza. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
Judge, I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
May
Ms.
I?
Corey? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Atkins, did Ms. Wilson ever tell you what your testimony should be?
No, ma'am.
Did any member of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office ever tell you what your testimony should be?
No, ma'am.
Did you discuss anything about the actual facts of the case with anyone else at the gate gas station while you were there?
No.
And when you were at the police memorial building, did you get together with any of the young men in the red Dodge Durango and talk about what any of you should say?
I didn't talk to a soul. I was withdrawn.
Why were you withdrawn?
Scared.
Has anyone from my office told you what to testify to here in court today?
No, ma'am.
And sir, isn't it true that let me ask you a question. Do you recall the days of your deposition?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall talking to Mr. Guy about, was there anything that could be done about the length of your sentence?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall being placed under oath in the deposition to talk to Mr. Strolla?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you hear Mr. Guy tell Mr. Strolla every word of conversation that the two of you had had about your request for leniency
Yes, very clearly.
in detail?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Mr. Strolla asked you whether or not you had been granted leniency by remaining in Duval County. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your understanding of what happens to your gain time in prison when you come back to Duval County?
Your Honor, I'm only going to object to speculation in terms of relevance as well, Your Honor. I don't think if I may, Your Honor, approach.
All right. Would the court report, please?